Well, welcome everyone to day 2 of Homecoming at Home 2020. I'm Holly Tate. I graduated in December of 2010, business management major from the Empire State Building campus, and I'm your president of the Alumni Executive Committee. And we are so glad you're here, whether you joined us last night and you're back again today, or whether today is your first time to join us. We welcome you. Whether you're from Northeastern Bible College, Briarcliff Days, the Empire State Building, or Wall Street, everyone is welcome here at Homecoming at Home. We invite you to join us in the chat. As you're seeing, we would love for you to tell us what year you graduated and where you're joining us from today. You can chat with each other there in the chat box. We'd love for you to say hello to your friends and catch up. That's what today is all about. I want to now hand it over to my fellow Executive Alumni Committee member, Steve French, who's going to open us in prayer today. He's also going to share a devotional with you over our theme this weekend, which is grace and human nature. So Steve, with that, I'll hand it over to you to lead us in our devotional for today and prayer.
Well, thank you, Holly. I recently returned from spending time in Boston with my grandchildren whose parents, I just got a notice there that there is something wrong, but I guess I'm okay here. I recently returned from spending some time in Boston with my grandchildren whose parents had King's and Northeastern backgrounds. My son-in-law, Brendan Case, is the King's College 2009 alumnus. And if anybody knows him, you know that he certainly loves books. And it's no surprise that my grandchildren love their pop reading them stories. And yours truly loves reading them stories. And I also enjoy making up some really good stories as well. The book, however, that was already shaping them has shaped all of us, and that is the Bible. It's filled with some amazing stories that are not the ones that are made up by grandpas in days gone by, but rather written by divine inspiration. What is true about the Bible is that there is a grand narrative that frames the biblical stories. The frame is a biblical worldview, right? Creation, the fall, followed by redemption and restoration that's driven by grace. Human nature for centuries has forgotten that they are not a part of the story, but they're not the main character. They're not the story. They're just part of a story. They're a story within a grand narrative. Though our story is significant to the author, it's quite small, and it's part of numerous other stories being told within the grand narrative. Two passionate and articulate young men understood this quite well. At the turn of the 20th century, they were being shaped by a grand narrative and decided to be trained by full-time vocational Christian work to communicate it to others. After graduating from Wheaton College, Percy Crawford and Charles Anderson enrolled into the Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia. And in 1930, 90 years ago, they became prayer partners. They prayed every Friday at noon, and both their prayers and their overwhelming passion was to communicate God's story to as many as possible. They shared a dream that their lives would be used powerfully for the redemption of men, women, and young people all over the world, and especially in the two metropolitan areas of Philadelphia and New York. Both envisioned and launched colleges, which ultimately had its roots in the suburbs of New York City. Percy Crawford founded the King's College, and Charles Anderson founded Northeastern Bible College. And so, God's grand narrative marches on. The story of God training young people to be salt and light to human beings in need of grace, to perfect and restore their souls. So now we're gathered with some history, even this morning, behind us, and we're here at this homecoming experience. There are so many stories here in this room. We represent various college campuses from Delaware to New Jersey to upstate New York, and of course, several campuses there in New York City. But there was another gathering of people that's outlined in the book of Deuteronomy. The story in this book is about a 120-year-old grandfather named Moses sitting down with the Israelites and recalling the various stories that they had experienced and how their stories are being woven into God's grand narrative. They were from different campuses. Some were from the Egyptian campus. Some number of them had numerous other campuses in the wilderness. And now they had set up campus on their eastern shore of the Jordan River. And I want you to notice in these verses that we're going to listen to how a grandfather, Moses, reminds Joshua and those Israeli alumni who came from different campuses that God is and should be the driving figure in their ongoing story. So listen to Deuteronomy chapter 31, just verses 6, 7, and 8.
Be strong and of good courage. Do not fear, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord your God, He is the one who goes with you. He will not leave you, nor forsake you.
Then Moses called Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel,
Be strong and of good courage, for you must go with this people to the land which the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them, and you shall cause them to inherit it. And the Lord, He is the one who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Do not fear, nor be dismayed.
So we're reminded, as Israel was, that they were a part of the grand narrative. They, as a nation, God had created them, right? But they had fallen into sin-filled patterns. And so God showered on them grace to redeem them and restore them. All 34 chapters in Deuteronomy is all about reminding Israel that their story is just a chapter in the grand narrative, and that God, not them, is the main character. So let us be a people, a collegiate community that remembers that we're a part of a grand narrative. I would just say personally to all of us, I think a number of us have had great moments of influencing culture. Some of us right now are just new alumni, and we're just now trying to make a mark for God and His kingdom. But we have this amazing capacity to forget. Just this amazing capacity to forget. And all 34 chapters is all about Moses reminding them of where they've been. And then if you go to the next book of Joshua, the first few chapters are all about reminding Joseph, remember, remember. And then you get to the New Testament and Jesus says, whatever you do, do this in remembrance of me. We have this amazing capacity to forget. And I want us to be a collegiate community that remembers that we are part of this amazing grand narrative, but we're just a part of it, and that God needs to be the main character. I know one thing, I'm going to be communicating this to my grandchildren in the days ahead. Now, it's my privilege to hand it over to our president, Tim Gibson. As someone who's an alumnus, I've gotten a chance over these years to really focus in on helping corporate and nonprofit leaders integrate their faith with work. I know leaders well, and I'm thrilled that we had Tim Gibson leading us at the King's College. Like Joshua, Tim has some military background, and that is and will serve our collegiate community well with the various challenges that we face as an institution. But he has a clear understanding, I know he does because I know him personally. He has a clear understanding that his story is just a part of a grand narrative. And one thing he does is that he leads with grace. I'll hand it over to my buddy, Tim Gibson. Tim?
Steve, thank you. It's a generous introduction, and I appreciate it very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me just add my welcome to day 2 of the King's College Homecoming at Home. I love the innovation and the adaptation that this represents, just evidence of our determination as a community to connect from wherever we are. I'm reading through the chat and I just see places all over. from whenever we are, because I see graduates from all the various campuses and different decades. And so that's a pretty special event, a pretty special outcome to have all of this come together. Now, it's rumored that yesterday we actually went a little bit long, and I can't promise that I won't be part of the problem if we go long again today, because there's so much I want to share with this community. My approach has essentially been to take everything that's, well, maybe not everything, but update you on the most significant things since the last time we were together, which would have been, this time last year. And there have been so many events and issues that have popped up that this community has engaged and addressed. And so I want to share some of that with you. So last night we heard that there was athletic excellence was part of the King's culture. And I would I would assure you that that is continuing. And at around this time last year, as a matter of fact, our women's volleyball team became conference champions here just over in Brooklyn at Pratt, where we hosted that final game. And it was exciting to see our community come together and rally around that team and watch them work so hard together toward a common goal and then achieve it. It's pretty special stuff. We also, around this time of year, are charged by the federal government to report on our employment statistics. How are our graduates doing after they graduate? You snap a chalk line at the 6-month point, and you have to report that. And nationally, the number is 85% of the class of 2019 found full-time employment or was in full-time graduate school 6 months after they graduated from their undergraduate institution. At King's, that number was 99%. It's held at 98% for a few years previous to that, as many of you know. So it was surprising to me that we really could improve too much, but in fact we did bump up to 99%. And I would love that the college could take all the credit for that, but it's simply not true, especially as I'm engaging so many of our alumni on this call. You know that the preparation that you get at King's is certainly part of that. But when you get into the room and you're being interviewed and your resume is the one that's being scrutinized, you do that on your own merits. And we're very proud of that figure, and we're proud of you for being out there to make that happen. So that was sort of a couple of the highlights as we went into the holiday break, and Christmas, and then New Year's played out. And then in January, we brought the emergency operations team together to take a careful look at this virus that was starting to be reported in the press, and it was predominantly evident in China, but New York City is such a global place, and we know that if something is going to unfold anywhere in the world, that its impact is going to be felt in the city without too much delay. And certainly that became true, right? So we saw COVID-19 make its way to New York City and the New York State area very quickly. And so by mid-March, we had transitioned our emergency operations team into a more focused COVID-19 task force. And they were meeting practically daily as new information was coming out about the virus and how it spreads and what we might do to be able to mitigate it. And then sure enough, by mid-March, the prudent decision was for us to send our students home and finish the semester completely remotely. Now, we know that is a sacrifice. We know that that is not the way students love to learn, and it's not the way professors love to teach. And so we certainly recognize that there's a negative to that and a downside. But given the circumstances, given the unknowns, it really was the most prudent choice for King's to make at that time. What I was impressed by, blown away by perhaps, was as soon as that decision was made and it was announced, immediately different parts of the college announced, okay, and so this is what that means. And so what it told me was so much more than just students having to go online and engage with their professors via Zoom, but faculty had already considered, all right, how am I going to transition my curriculum into an online format? And academic advising had already figured out how we were going to counsel students on what courses they would need to take in the future, and we're going to do that remotely now. And student success had already figured out how are we going to do office hours. And so the second and third order effects in marketing communications, in the admissions process, the second and third order effects had already been considered and accounted for in viable ways. It does not mean that our plan was perfect. The folks here at the college have heard me say so many times, a plan is only something to deviate from, but we had a plan. And I was very impressed that those that were responsible for certain areas of the college had already thought through the second and third order effects of going to a fully remote experience. And in fact, not only did we just transition and make do, in some ways we actually thrived. We innovated beyond what might have been expected. And so we ended up doing our commencement, for example, completely online. And that wasn't something that we certainly wanted to do. We want to have our students be able to be there with their faculty members who are so important to them, and with their families, and do all of that way. But we ended up having well over 500 attendees. Our commencement speaker was the chaplain of the U.S. Senate, Barry Black, a retired Navy two-star, and he just did a fabulous job embracing our theme of good, brave, and ready, and communicating to our students in a meaningful way, our graduates, as they were crossing that stage. Beyond that, in secret, our marketing communication team put together a virtual yearbook, and they invited families to submit pictures and quotes and things of that nature. And we surprised the class of 2020 with that as we were approaching commencement. I think they deeply appreciated it. Beyond that, even, we took those inputs and built out a hard copy of that yearbook. And those hard copy yearbooks were then printed and shipped with them with their diplomas alongside that. And so I love the way our college, our administration, our faculty and staff have not just embraced the challenge of COVID-19, but then figured out ways to even go further and better with that. So immediately after commencement, we had a pretty significant staff change. This is particularly for those of you who are Empire State Building and Wall Street alum. You'll recognize Eric Bennett as our Vice President of Student Development. And Eric, shortly after graduation, retired from higher education after 30 years in Christian higher ed. I mean, talk about somebody who has done his part and done it extremely well. So Eric has shifted over into now Bennett Collaborative, which he founded as a consulting firm, and you can find him on LinkedIn and whatnot. And we're still very much in touch with Eric. He's not moved away or anything along these lines, but it was time for him to transition to something new, and he did that very well and gave us plenty of heads up, which gave us time to consider organizational shifts and opportunities for others in the areas for which he was responsible, which were broad. It was not just student development, but then admissions, marketing communications, financial aid, et cetera. And so that created some opportunity for some things to shift around just a bit, and new relationships organizationally to be formed. And so we've adapted to that over the course of this summer. And that's been a special time to watch folks work at the next level up, and to work so much more collaboratively left and right, which were roles that oftentimes Eric was taking on when he was serving so effectively here. So as we came into the fall semester, it was clear to us that we wanted to be back in person as much as possible. And so we leaned into that in a way that we think is very prudent with regard to COVID-19. So we've got the constraints of federal and state and city restrictions that we have to comply with, most notably the 14-day travel quarantine that was required for all of us as we were starting the fall semester. And we achieved that as a community. We had programming set up each day of the 14 days for different events, either hosted by the house, or in some cases, staff members would share particular passions that they have, and students could participate if they chose to. We had devotionals and Bible studies throughout that time. And so it was pretty special to be able to do that together, although it was inconvenient. It turned out to be a neat way for us to bond as a community, and especially for our first-time full-time students. They said that it was something that they found helpful as they were focusing, rather than be distracted by the temptation to run around New York City and go explore and all those things that would eventually come. They were actually sort of forced to focus and get to know their roommates well, and get a jump start on their studies, and that went extremely well. So what an adaptation, and what a way that to start the fall semester. From our faculty perspective, I want to brag on them just a bit, because we have shifted into a very much a hybrid approach to learning, and that would be that rather than meeting twice a week, for example, the section would meet once in person and then once remotely. And while our faculty are teaching in person to those students who are here, we've installed a system that allows them to also teach simultaneously to students who are participating remotely. And so that is an innovation that, as we heard from some of our students last night, they found surprisingly effective. And in fact, I think one of the students actually said it was a little bit eerie just to have somebody raise their hand on a computer screen next to them in the classroom, and yet it works well. And so that type of innovation, and our faculty being willing to engage in that and still teach so effectively, has been just something that we can be particularly proud of. So how'd we do with regard to COVID? I think that is a fair question. And I'm sorry, I'm getting some text that makes me wonder that I'm maybe not hitting all the points that I should. Okay, I think I can adapt. So the question became then, how did we actually do with regard to COVID-19, right? How did we're in New York City over the March, April, May timeframe? The cases across the city and across New York State were rampant. Is probably not much of an exaggeration. We were certainly the North American epicenter during that time frame, but that curve came back down, and this fall, to date, we've had exactly 2 cases of COVID-19 in our community. One of which was a case that the individual had not been on campus leading up to displaying symptoms, and didn't come back to campus until after those symptoms had receded and a full recovery was underway. And so that case really didn't have much potential to spread COVID through our community, of course. The other is sort of what we expected. It would have been somebody who was on campus, and we did have to look for close contacts and do some precautionary quarantine there, and notify some others that had been peripheral contacts. But we have been protected. God has been so gracious to us in protecting us from the impacts of COVID-19. As you might imagine, New York City and New York State are watching very carefully the caseloads across from colleges, and have had a couple of colleges shut down and turned into complete remote learning again. And while I know we can do that well, it's not what we would prefer to do. And so we're very pleased that we've been as effective as we are. So for the spring semester, what are we thinking right now? What we're thinking is along the lines of, we want to get back to as much normalcy as possible, but do so very prudently, right? So we do have some courses that are predominantly elective, so they're smaller cohorts. And rather than meet in a hybrid way, we actually have the capacity to socially distance and meet completely in person. And so we're gonna do that. We're gonna see that in the spring semester. We're gonna continue with the integration of this technology that allows a synchronous approach to learning for students who, for whatever reason, are going to be participating remotely. And it's working well for us. It's actually more immersive than we expected, according to our provost, Dr. Mark Hidgley. And so it's an unexpected blessing and one that we want to continue to embrace. The other thing we're doing, though, is continuously reevaluating our policy. I've made the comment a couple of times that if you take your eye off the ball just for a day or two with regard to COVID, something has changed, and something pretty significant in many cases. So it's incumbent upon us to keep paying attention and to keep reevaluating how do our policies align with the new constraints, or what opportunities for returning to normalcy might there be, and how do we do that well. And so this layered approach to COVID-19 has been very effective for us to date. We're going to continue to embrace that methodology, and I can't say enough good about the COVID task force and our community's willingness to be inconvenienced, to be constrained themselves, but out of a care for each other and a passion to keep the mission moving in as best a way forward as we can. I think that would actually lead me to sort of the things you might pray about for the college. I love the devotion this morning. It is not a time to be fearful, absolutely, and yet we're going to be required, I think, to continue to innovate and to continue to endure these inconveniences. To continue to be faithful, not just to God, but to our commitment to each other as we go forward. And those are challenging commitments. Those commitments that could sometimes take a drain on folks. And I know many of you are experiencing much the same in your work environments yourselves. So you understand it, and I'm sure it resonates in that way. But those would be some specific prayer requests for our team. We some time ago, I expanded my president's cabinet pretty significantly. We went from 5 to 15 members. And one of the things that we do each week is a devotion as we open our weekly cabinet meeting. And in the last several weeks, we've been looking at 2 Timothy and the importance of endurance. And so perhaps that's why it's fresh on my mind. But for those who are seeking for something to pray for, our students and staff and faculty, that would certainly be what I'd ask you for. So the future for King's is going to be characterized by innovation and by partnerships. The innovation with regard to technology and course structure has been something that's gone better than we perhaps anticipated. And so I think it's going to be something that, even if COVID is a distant memory, is going to be a key part of the college going forward. And then partnerships. It's striking to me how consistent the mission has been since the Percy Crawford and Charles Anderson days, all the way forward to today. You can draw a thread of Christ prominent and mission outreach and a very missional approach to things. And perhaps our focus of that effort is not necessarily unreached peoples, perhaps, but in other ways, maybe it is. I will sometimes tell folks we're not necessarily looking at the 1040 window anymore as our mission field, but rather boardrooms and green rooms and newsrooms and other places of that type. And certainly there is a need for salt and light in those places as well. And so again, I am so passionate about the college, about our mission, about what we do. And I'm very proud of the way the college has adapted. The staff, the faculty, the students have embraced this reality, and we're making the very best of it and even better in many cases. I could go on and on, and I won't do that to our timetable today. But I am so encouraged that we've had so many people join us last night. I love watching the chat blow up, and I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the day's agenda. So thanks for being here. We very much appreciate your connectedness to the college, and it's wonderful that we've got an alumni executive committee that is so serious about enabling us to all come together for times like this. Even if it's not exactly what we would hope for, it's special to be here. So Holly, let me turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, President Gibson. We know that this year has not been easy for anyone, but especially education. And we are so thankful for your leadership and perseverance during this time. And I love what you said about the future being innovation and partnerships. And as the Executive Alumni Committee, we are here to partner with you and support you in your efforts. So thank you so much. With that, we are going to transition into alumni stories. And first up is John Seidel. John interviewed several of our alumni last night, but I get the honor of interviewing him this morning. So John, for those that might not know, give us a quick update of what the last couple of months of your life has looked like.
Yeah, so I think the biggest one is that maybe some of you have heard about, and I shared a little bit yesterday, is that I'm a recent kidney donor. And so that's been quite a cool experience to really gotten the call from the Lord that was something that I just needed to do. And so, I credit the foundation laid at King's and really the formative years of my faith that really made that decision easy. And so it's been quite a ride, especially over the last month, and things are going pretty well.
That's awesome. Well, we're glad to see you recovering well. And also, just for folks who might not know who you are, let everybody know what year you graduated.
So I graduated in 2009 from the ESB campus, and was there all 4 years, and met my wife there as well.
That's awesome. Well, and you're also a fellow member of the Alumni Executive Committee. So thank you for serving with us. And with that, I will hand it over to you to interview a few of our other alumni today.
Well, thanks. Appreciate that. And so I'd like to bring on Elle Rogers. Elle, if you would just tell us what you're doing these days, what year you graduated, what campus, and we'd just love to hear from you.
Thanks, John. Glad to be back. I am Elle. I graduated from Wall Street campus in May 2019, studied philosophy. I worked in the Senate for a bit, did the John Jay Fellows program, and I'm now in my first year of law school at the University of Chicago. And I can't talk enough about how much King's prepared me. Academically, the study of law is architectonic, which is very PPE. It's like essential properties, questions of causation. And I'm like, oh, it's all metaphysics with Dr. Blander full time. But I think on a deeper level, the legal profession and the policy world, they can be dark places. They're very concerned with status and competition. And the most important thing I learned at King's is that the kingdom of God brings light to the dark places. And it's the reason that we can not only seek, but secure justice. And that vision informs every part of my law school experience. So very grateful.
That's great. And as some have noticed, potentially a family member, the pin that you are wearing, which is awesome, representing King. So love that. Thanks, Elle. Let's transition to Bruce Hoppy, who's an NBC grad. Bruce, so excited to have you. Why don't you tell us what year you graduated from NBC? We had a great turnout in the breakout room yesterday for NBC grads. And what's your journey looked like, and what are you up to these days?
Thanks. Yeah, Bruce Hoppy here, and I am currently in Greeley, Colorado, about an hour north of Denver. I'm one of the pastors on the directional team of Christ Community Church, lead a staff of 42 people here. And my journey, graduated Northeastern Bible College in '82, actually a New York City suburban boy. That's where I grew up. And my call to ministry on the street of New York City, Times Square, doing street ministry for a lot of years, just really placed the church on my heart, and helping the church to be all that God wants it to be, as a thriving family, reaching people of all generations, of all cultures, of all backgrounds. And so I left Northeastern, went to Wheaton Grad School outside of Chicago. This is the 5th church that I have served as a pastor. Was in Chicago area and Boston area as an associate pastor, came back to Chicago as a senior pastor, executive pastor, and then have been here for 16 years. And just really grateful for Northeastern, not only giving me a great love for God's word, but also a great love for people, and exegeting people and culture as thoroughly as exegeting God's word and putting that together. And it's been my joy to do that for 38 years now.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for answering that call. Appreciate that, Bruce. And I love it. It's like you can hear the New York accent, but you can also hear the Chicago accent. It's just awesome. I love it all.
Yeah. The people out here in Colorado try to figure me out. I'm a bit of an enigma.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Bruce. Let's transition to Diana Bellini. Diana, we got to hear a little bit from you in the breakout room last night, but why don't you just tell everyone what year you graduated and what you have been up to and what are you doing now?
Sure. Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. I graduated in 2006 with a business major. I attended the Empire State Building campus. I want to take this opportunity to thank donors and supporters of the King's College. Thanks to your financial support, my life changed forever. The King's College prepared me to lead in the financial services, but it also gave me a life-changing opportunity to not be a statistic, but to be the first college grad in my immigrant family. It also led me to Christ. So that I can never be thankful enough for that opportunity. Over the past 13 years, I have been working in the financial services. I have worked for 2 major financial institutions. I work for BNY Mellon, and I'm currently working at PNC Bank. I am a relationship manager in the wealth management business, where I lead a team of bankers, investment advisors, fiduciary advisors, and wealth planners who help me guide my clients through all aspects of their financial life, especially during these difficult times. I feel very blessed to be in the front line of the economy and the global markets. I am passionate about giving back to the community, similar to what King's College did to me. So I'm involved in 3 organizations. I mentor and develop Latinos around the country through an organization called Alpha. I am on the board of Junior Achievement of Western Pennsylvania and on the board of Girl Scouts of Western Pennsylvania, where I help girls find financial freedom and empower them to reach their potential. I live with my husband of 13 years, Tony. We have a daughter named Sophia. She's almost 9. And we live here in Pittsburgh, the home of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here we go.
Well, I'm down in, although I'm a big Packers fan and from Wisconsin, I'm down in the Dallas area. So that there's that Dallas Steelers game this weekend, which I don't think is going to be much of a game. Yeah. Well, thanks, Diana. And I'm not going to lie, I might have found myself getting a little emotional when you talked about being the first grad in your immigrant family. And that's awesome. It's so awesome to hear. And as someone said in the chat, it's why we love what Bridget does to give that opportunity to other students. So thank you. And thank everyone that has shared their stories over the last couple of days. I really loved this. And so with that, I will turn it back to Chris Ross, who's going to talk about some of the alumni awards.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again this morning. As John said, my name is Chris Ross. I'm a graduate from the class of 2010, member of the House of Lewis. I currently live in Washington, D.C., and there's some honking and cheering going on the street, so apologies if some of that bleeds through my microphone here. One of my absolute favorite parts of being part of the alumni community, and a lot of you heard me talk about this last night, is the chance to recognize excellent alumni in our community. These are the people who are out in their vocational fields, who are pursuing truth passionately, who are pioneers in their fields, who work in ministry and do so fervently, and people who are distinguishing themselves in whatever field they live in. And I love hearing those stories as a member of this committee. And I love that we get to give out awards every year where we get to recognize these stories and share them with the rest of you. So every year we take nominations, and I'm going to share a link in the chat box down here where you can go and put in your own nominations, and you can read a little bit about more of each of the awards that we grant on that page. And like I said, we shared some of this last night, and I checked this morning, and we already got a bunch of new nominations. And so I encourage everybody to go think about people you know who are doing great things, people who have great stories to be told, whether they work in media or ministry or law or policy or education or missions. King's alumni do so many great things, and my network only extends so far, and the network of other members of this committee only extends so far. And so the more that you guys can tell us who's out there doing great things, the better of a pool that we have to help award some of these nominations, to give out some of these awards. And so if you click on the link that I put in the chat box, you'll be able to see what our different awards are. We have the J. Stanley Oakes Award, that recognizes somebody who's a pioneer in their field. We have the Charles W. Anderson Award, who recognizes and honors people who are in full-time vocational ministry. We have the Distinguished Service Award, which recognizes alumni who have served King's or the Alumni Association or both. And we have the Alumnus or Alumna of the Year Award, which we use to recognize somebody who is distinguished in their field and who has dedicated their life to the Lord. So please go to the link. Please think about who might be deserving of the award this year, and give us a good description in the body of your message so that we know, why are they a pioneer? Why are they excellent in ministry? Why are they distinguished in their field? And help us out here. So I'm now going to turn to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, and that's Professor David Tubbs. And I'll just give a quick introduction, and then I'll turn it over to him. But Professor David Tubbs has been teaching at King since 2005. He teaches courses in constitutional law, political philosophy, and public policy. He's also the director of King's new Center for the Study of Christianity and the Black Experience. And that's going to be among the topics of his address this morning. He, as a professor, also regularly serves as an advisor to students who are working on their senior thesis. And I bring that last point up just because, as a personal note, he was my own senior thesis advisor 10 years ago on a topic of the First Amendment's free exercise clause in a Supreme Court case called Oregon versus Smith. And incidentally, that very case was back before a newly constituted Supreme Court just last week. And I don't know if he's going to talk about that at all this morning, probably not in this keynote session, but it might come up in his breakout session coming up later this afternoon. So I'm personally interested in that, and I'm sure many of you who had him for constitutional law are as well. Professor Tubbs is not only an excellent scholar, though, he's also an excellent and caring teacher. He was awarded Faculty of the Year back in 2010 by my own class. And this year he was chosen by the students again to be Faculty of the Year for his combination of excellence and humility. So I'm really pleased to have Dr. Tubbs with us this morning. He's going to speak for about the next half an hour, and then we're going to have around 15 minutes or so for question and answer time. So if you do have a question at all while he's talking, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little thing that says Q&A that has some little chat bubbles on it. If you have any questions while he's talking or later on, feel free to throw them in there. And then once he finishes up his prepared remarks, I'll moderate some questions and answers. And I really look forward to hearing from Professor Tubbs, as well as having some great questions from you all. So Professor Tubbs, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Chris, for that very kind introduction. I'm delighted to be here for homecoming. And I can say because of COVID, I've gotten some practice giving lectures in front of my computer in my modest 19th century abode in Lambertville, New Jersey, which is where I'm speaking from right now. Chris gave you a preview of what I'm going to be speaking about in part. And I wanted to begin by talking about academic year 2019-20. It was a year, despite COVID, despite the pandemic, of notable achievements at King's, and I wanted to mention just two of them. The first, as Chris said, we launched the Center for the Study of Christianity and the Black Experience. The official announcement came in June as the academic year was winding down. And around the same time, I know we were working on it for much of the year, we adopted a statement on academic freedom. And in my talk today, I would like to speak about both of these matters. And I'm going to try to surprise you by drawing some connections between the two of them. So before doing so, I think it's appropriate to acknowledge that both of these initiatives received very important support from Provost Mark Hidgley and President Tim Gibson. And so I wanted to thank them publicly for the support they offered. That support was crucial to the success of the initiatives, and I know that these initiatives will make King's a much better college. So thank you to both of them for encouragement and different kinds of support. If you have not already done so, I encourage you, when you have a little bit of free time, to read the Statement on Academic Freedom. Read it in full. But for now, let me direct your attention to some of the highlights from the statement. First, a little historical grounding. Our statement on academic freedom derives from the 2015 report issued by the Committee on Free Expression at the University of Chicago. That statement, contained in the report of the University of Chicago Committee, has been adopted, sometimes with some modifications, by approximately 75 other colleges and universities in the United States as of 2020. So it's worth looking at. You can find this easily online, the schools that have adopted these principles. We at King's are in distinguished company if we consider some of the other institutions, including Columbia, Princeton, some very fine liberal arts colleges, and some major state universities in the Midwest, for example, University of Wisconsin. So all this is to the good, but I think it's important in the context of homecoming weekend to reflect on what the statement means for King's as an institution. So I wanted to read just the opening paragraph from the statement as a way of getting into this. It goes as follows. Because the King's College is committed to free and open inquiry, it guarantees all members of the King's College community the broadest possible latitude to speak, write, listen, challenge, and learn, except insofar as limitations on that freedom are necessary to the functioning of the King's College, including its Christian mission as expressed in its statement of faith, which is affirmed by faculty and staff. The King's College fully respects and supports the freedom of all members of the college community to, quote, discuss any problem that presents itself, end quote. And that final phrase comes from the report issued by the University of Chicago Committee. Now, it would be good to reflect on that paragraph that I just read. The statement acknowledges King's Christian identity. It also acknowledges the need for some regulations to facilitate the free exchange of ideas. If one reads the whole statement, one will see that it includes references, this is directly from constitutional law, time, place, and manner regulations, which have given rise to certain protocols in American higher education. Let me summarize these very briefly. It's worth knowing these, even if one has graduated from college. It's just worth knowing what the lay of the land is with respect to the free exchange of ideas. The protocols, for example, on college campuses require, among other things, that professors be allowed to teach their regularly scheduled courses. If they're teaching something that's controversial, students do not have a right to disrupt the professor. If there is an invited lecturer, even if the invited lecturer has views that are known to the community, and those views are objectionable to some members, or perhaps they strongly disagree, they are not permitted to prevent the lecture from taking place. They're not permitted to harass the lecturer while giving the lecture. There is some sense of decorum and order. These are regulations in the interest of promoting the fullest possible exchange of ideas. So we have these protocols. We also, in that opening statement, we have this acknowledgement of King's as a Christian institution. And I can imagine that some of our secular critics would say that the statement's acknowledgement of the Christian profile of King's is, in a sense, probably self-defeating. Our critics might say that our commitment to the free exchange of ideas is in tension with and probably undermined by our identity as a Christian college. And in my time at King's, I've heard versions of this from some of our secular detractors. So some years ago, I think it was about 8 years ago, somebody writing for New York Magazine wanted to do a profile of King's. It wasn't from the outset intended to be a very favorable profile. And the working premise of this journalist, who's still very active in the city, he now works for the New Yorker. The working premise is that there's no real free exchange of ideas at King's because you're a Christian college. After all, this is nothing but indoctrination that's taking place at King's. I, of course, strongly disagree with this. And I want to comment on this a bit and then take these comments and tie them to the justification for the new Center for the Study of Christianity and the Black Experience. The Christian faith can, whatever the critics might say, the Christian faith can anchor the liberal arts, and it has done so in the past. It does so in two principal ways. First, by reminding us that the Christian message, namely the message of the life and teachings of the man known as Jesus of Nazareth, whom Christians believe was the Christ, the Christian message affected a revolution in the consciousness of the Greco-Roman world, as the distinguished theologian David Bentley Hart argued in his book, Atheist Delusions. It had affected a revolution in the consciousness of the Greco-Roman world, which in turn led to a great reappraisal of Greco-Roman values. And the knowledge of these matters, the revolution in consciousness and the great reappraisal of Greco-Roman values, allows us to see the whole tradition of the liberal arts in the West in new ways. But those who lack this knowledge, of what Christianity did to humanistic disciplines such as philosophy in the ancient world, those who lack this knowledge are deprived of something absolutely essential to understanding the modern world. If you'll permit me to quote the great German philosopher, G.W.F. Hegel, Hegel said that Christianity is the line that separates the ancient world from the modern world. And if we don't understand what Christianity was, our own knowledge of the modern world is going to be terribly lacking. Second point, the Christian faith anchors the liberal arts in another way. Specifically, it sets a standard for all of our interactions in intellectual or academic pursuits. Let me elaborate what I mean by this, setting a standard. The Sermon on the Mount instructs us to love our enemies, and that directive can and should certainly apply to the exchange of ideas, theories, and different kinds of research in an academic setting. We should respond with a generosity of spirit, even to those persons who are putting forth ideas and theories that strike us as wrong or disagreeable or flawed or simply wrong-headed. We even should respond with a measure of charity to ideas and theories that conflict with the teachings of the Christian faith. And let me use a recent example from public policy and constitutional law as an example of this. I would submit that most Christians in the United States, during the long period in which the debate was taking place, most Christians did respond with civility and respect to those who are arguing for or defending same-sex marriage. Many Christians in the United States were upset that the policy question was ultimately resolved by the Supreme Court of the United States, but the debate about same-sex marriage in this country was overwhelmingly civil. And I attribute that in part to the Christian tradition. The Christian tradition in the liberal arts. Still, I can imagine that some critics of the faith will insist that there are much better models of the liberal arts education today. That is, they would favor these other models over the Christian tradition in the liberal arts. So let's briefly consider these other models. I have identified two that I'd like to discuss with you in the next few minutes. The first account is grounded in the life and example of the Greek thinker Socrates. The second is based on the metaphor, a very common metaphor these days called the marketplace of ideas. With respect to the Socratic tradition and the first model, alternative model of the liberal arts tradition, let us recall that Socrates really did inspire the philosophic vocation or the academic vocation for many centuries. Socrates, his whole way of being is said by many to epitomize the philosophic life. It is characterized by relentless questioning of conventional ideas and received wisdom. This tradition, the great influence of Socrates, has been extremely long-lived. And as I would cite as one heir to the legacy of Socrates, the great 19th century political theorist in the UK, John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill, in so many ways, exemplifies Socratic virtues at their best. But I would say right now we have some evidence starting to accumulate that the Socratic tradition does not receive the same kind of adherence that it did previously from people who identify themselves as liberals of one sort or another. Mill's virtues extended even to a kind of willingness to engage with ideas that he regarded as indisputably wrong. He held this view because he said that truth is more clearly or more fully understood when it collides with error. So we can understand truth better sometimes when it's juxtaposed with error. But I don't think that this norm is as strong as it was during Mill's time, or at least I don't think it's as strong today as it was in the writings of Mill himself. I share the following anecdote from you. In 2004, the year before I started teaching at King's, Amherst College, a distinguished liberal arts college in the state of Massachusetts, invited Justice Antonin Scalia to speak at the college. And one of the professors at the college, professor of jurisprudence, in fact, with about a dozen faculty colleagues, wrote a letter to the student newspaper urging the entire Amherst community to boycott the lecture. I've read the letter to the student newspaper. It's not very well written. It's kind of incoherent, suggesting at some level that Justice Scalia did not follow democratic norms. That's not my key point here. The key point is that on a traditional Socratic model of the liberal arts, one would think that even people who believe that Justice Scalia was fundamentally wrong about the most important issues in jurisprudence would still be willing to hear him out, talk to him, and then engage in argument. The point being that if Mill was right, and if truth is sometimes more fully understood when it collides with error, even those people who believe that Scalia was fundamentally wrong should have been willing to have discussion with him. What about the second model of liberal arts education, which is captured in the metaphor known as the marketplace of ideas? And what exactly do we mean by this metaphor, marketplace of ideas? I think if we reflect on the terms, we can unpack the metaphor. It is suggesting a comparison, it's inviting a comparison between the competition that takes place in the academy, competition among different theories, hypotheses, arguments, the competition taking place in the academy with the competition that takes place among competing goods and services in a free economic market. And the thinking here, again, reflected in the metaphor, the expectation is that the best theory or argument will prevail in the same way that the best product or the best service will come to dominate a particular market. And I believe that this metaphor has much value, but it misses a few crucial elements of liberal arts education. Most conspicuously, the metaphor really does not encompass the lived experiences or histories of different peoples. I said earlier in talking about the Christian liberal arts tradition that we must remember that Christianity, the Christian liberal arts tradition, is grounded in history. It fundamentally pivots on the birth of Jesus, his life, his teachings, his death, and the establishment and growth of the church. The Christian liberal arts tradition is grounded in history. This idea of liberal arts education conveyed through the metaphor of the marketplace of ideas, if you reflect on it, it really has nothing to say about lived experiences of different peoples or the histories, more prosaically, the histories of different peoples. And I want to be clear on this. I'm referring to bodies of historical fact from which arise so many different theories, ideas, and arguments about the human condition. And some of those ideas, theories, and arguments about the human condition do involve debates about how to interpret history. But where the metaphor is lacking is it does not allow for the importance of lived historical experiences as a fundamental part of the liberal arts. Again, you cannot have theories, arguments, hypotheses about anything relating to human affairs, public affairs, without reference to lived human experiences. And as I am arguing, the Christian liberal arts tradition has the capacity, a much greater capacity, to assimilate bodies of historical fact into it for the reason that I indicated. The Christian faith pivots on claims of historical truth about Jesus of Nazareth, and the Christian liberal arts is premised, is founded on that historical truth. Having praised the Christian liberal arts tradition, I now need to examine it in a more critical light. And this leads me to talk about the Christian liberal arts tradition in the United States and my willingness to concede that the Christian liberal arts tradition in the United States has not done a good job of integrating the lived experiences of African Americans into it. Similarly, it has been largely indifferent to the history of the Black church in the United States. And both of these shortcomings are, in my judgment, significant factors behind the ambivalence that many young Christians today, white and Black, Protestant and Catholic, now feel towards the faith. And these are the principal reasons that King's decided to launch the Center for the Study of Christianity and the Black Experience. Principal reasons for launching the center, principal reasons for the decision to name Dr. Jacqueline Rivers as the first senior fellow of the center. And as I think most of you know, in the spring, next semester, Dr. Rivers will be teaching a course, a special topics course at King's called The Black Church in Slavery and in Freedom. In conclusion, I would like to elaborate just a little bit more on some of the points that I was making over the last few minutes. The Christian liberal arts tradition is alive and well at King's, and that tradition, as I have argued, has much more cogency than its critics seem to recognize. But the vitality of the liberal arts at King's does not allow us, or should not allow us, to be complacent. For many reasons, we need to give more attention to the lived experiences of African Americans in the United States, both Christian and non-Christian. Attention to their history and the history of institutions such as the Black church should be seen as integral to Christian liberal arts. At King's, we are deeply interested in big ideas and big theories, but these ideas and theories, especially in the world of human affairs or public affairs, require substantial historical knowledge. The Center for the Study of Christianity and the Black Experience will provide critical resources so that the King's community can increase its knowledge of the history of the African American experience, the Black church, and race relations in the United States. And I would welcome any comments or questions you have about any of the matters I've raised in my lecture here today. So thanks very much.
Well, thanks a lot, Professor Tubbs. That was a very illuminating and helpful discussion to think about some of the historical trends that we've been seeing, some of the ways that we as Christians have, shown up strong in these debates, and some of the areas where we may have fallen behind. So I think it's very thought-provoking on just for me. So to try to tie it, so I love hearing what King's is doing and the way that its faculty and its students are going to engage on these things. What are some ways that you think maybe we as alumni who are not, we're not in the academic environment, we're not only talking among students, we're not only talking among faculty, what are some ways that we can try to model this in the public square, in our own spheres?
Well, I would encourage all the alumni who have an interest in what I've been discussing to, once the center launches next semester, we'll have a website fairly soon, we'll have academic programs, all the things that you would expect. Some of our events will be broadcast. You can participate virtually. I would encourage alumni who are interested in this to share what they're learning from the center with other people who might be interested, including friends at church, friends at work. Maybe they're not believers, but to share some of this knowledge as a kind of a preview of an upcoming event on Tuesday, December 8th in the evening. We chose this event to take place in the evening, specifically so that alumni could tune in if their schedules permit. We're going to be having an event to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the ratification of the 15th Amendment, giving Black men the right to vote after the end of the Civil War. And to that end, we are going to have a lecture by a journalist, a really well-known journalist who has done path-breaking work investigating unsolved murders of the civil rights era in the state of Mississippi. The journalist, his name is Jerry Mitchell, and he had a book published earlier this year to wide acclaim called Race Against Time, the effort to bring to justice Klansmen who were involved in the murder of various civil rights workers, bring them to justice before they died. And so Jerry Mitchell, some of you, I can imagine, might have seen this documentary film about the prosecution, the arrest, prosecution, and conviction of the last Klansman associated with the murder of the 3 civil rights workers in summer of '64 in Neshoba County. This documentary film called Neshoba. Jerry Mitchell, the journalist, is featured quite prominently in that documentary film. And that documentary film I recommend to anybody. It is such a timely film right now, given the conversation that began in the spring about race relations in the United States. So aside from that, Chris, the other thing I would say is the resources of the center, I would hope, could be of value to all King's alumni, white, Black, Asian, whatever their backgrounds, in understanding more the history of race relations in the United States, and also understanding more about the Black church.
Well, thank you for that. So as a reminder to the audience, those who are listening in, there is a Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom link. We'd love to have your questions about all these things that Professor Tubbs has been speaking about, whether it's the center in particular, whether it's the discussion of civility and engaging in the public square more generally. We'd love to continue this conversation going for another 10, 15 minutes. So there are a couple questions piling up, and I'll start asking them, maybe pepper a few of my own in as well.
Sure.
Anymore. So we have one here from Katie Sangalis, so probably remember her from a few years ago. Yeah, she asks, what sorts of public policies do you recommend to address the inequality of the lived experiences of the Black community in the United States?
What sort of public policies? Well, some of the students who were PPE majors who graduated before 2013 I think 12 or 13 who were required to take public policy as a major requirement. So I know that's true of you, Chris. I remember the sequence pretty well. PPE majors used to take con law with me in fall semester of their junior year, and they take public policy in spring of their junior year. And I've taught that unit in the public policy course, the unit on reparations, as long as I've been at King's. And for many years, I told students at King's, I don't know whether this ever will be a national issue. Well, lo and behold, this year it became a national issue. But I said it, it wasn't a prediction. I'm not very good at making predictions about future political developments. And speaking for myself, my position would be on the question of public policy. If one really wanted to understand all the different dimensions of public policy and how we as a nation have to come to terms with the legacy of racial injustice, I would say, from my standpoint, the way to get at this is start reading books and articles about the debate on reparations. This is not, I want to emphasize this, and those of you who've taken public policy with me probably have heard this, and I'm still saying the same thing, essentially. I was teaching public policy in the spring of this year. My position is that reparations could, in the end, be a bad idea if it led to the worsening of race relations in the United States. I believe many Black Americans are ambivalent about having a full-fledged discussion about reparations for precisely that reason. They think that it might lead to tremendous resentment on the part of non-Blacks towards Blacks, and there might be a kind of wariness, like we don't want to have that discussion. Other African Americans have different reasons for either opposition to reparations or misgivings. But from my standpoint, exploring that debate would make one aware of many other issues in public policy worthy of our attention. It's very hard to say, give me the issue that seems most crucial to you right now, the public policy issue that seems most crucial to you now. I don't want to dodge that question. I want to say that I think the better way to appreciate where we are right now is to explore that debate, look at people on both sides of the debate, and just reflect on all the issues that the debate has raised, because it's just a fascinating debate, and it's been so for a while.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about it in terms of a debate, one of the key things you have to do in a debate is define your terms. And so our next question comes from Alexandra Harrison Geyser. And she says that in the course of this lecture, you've mentioned things that do or do not include the lived experiences of people, and offered a few other terms like history. And so Alexandra is wondering, how would you define that term, which I think she means lived experience? How would you define that term, or what the importance of its inclusion or exclusion is?
Okay, very good question. Very good question. And I didn't want to get too philosophic here, but Alexandra has forced me to become more philosophic. Okay.
She has a way of doing that.
So I distinguished in passing that when we think of this metaphor of the marketplace of ideas, I said that metaphor probably can do an adequate job in making sense of debates about historical interpretation, right? There are significant debates among historians about, say, the principal factor behind a historical development or historical event. Like, what was the most important factor? Why is that factor more important than these other competing factors? But what I had in mind when I talked about lived experiences in history per se, not historical interpretation, not the writing of history, I have in mind what could be called the realm of historical fact. Things that simply happened in the world. If permit me, to describe it, things that happened because of human action or human inaction, right? I've used this example, I think, in the public policy course, but I can't recall off the top of my head what the context is. This is what I'm trying to get at, and I'll elaborate on just a little bit more in a second. French minister Clemenceau, who was prime minister during the First World War, as he was nearing death, he was asked do you have any final thoughts on the outbreak of the First World War? Like, what caused it? And he said, well, I know one thing, no one will ever say that the First World War was precipitated by the Belgian invasion of Germany. Why? Because it was Germany invading Belgium. This is just a brute historical fact, an irreducible historical fact. Germany invades Belgium, Belgium does not invade Germany. And it's the nature of these facts that my position is that virtually everything we do at King's in the realm of public affairs or human affairs depends in large part, not exclusively, but in large part on these lived experiences, historical facts themselves. The facts are sooner or later assimilated to theories, ideas, arguments, but the facts themselves are very fragile things. So if I could just quote very quickly from the deservedly renowned essay by Hannah Arendt called Truth and Politics. She says, when we think of factual truths, we become aware at once of how much more vulnerable they are than all the kinds of rational truths taken together, like all the kinds of theories that we might associate with scientific truth or moral truth or truth in the realm of political philosophy or jurisprudence. This is the bold assertion that historical fact is simply more vulnerable. And by more vulnerable, she means that politics can essentially suppress all kinds of historical facts. And there's so much evidence of this in different countries around the world. And my position in the United States, we have, and I say this on the basis of what many students at King's have told me over the years. Students have said, I don't want to identify particular states, but students say from the South, they've said the way Reconstruction and segregation were presented in my history books, you know, I went to reputedly a good public high school, the way Reconstruction and segregation are presented so different from the way they're presented in the civil rights course. And they said, it's not just a question of emphasis, it's a question of certain facts just being suppressed. It's not being allowed to be included in the narrative.
Yeah, so sort of continuing down that line of sort of thinking about some of these things a little bit more philosophically, Matt Huffman asks, we sometimes seem to be living in a post-truth society where folks offer conflicting basic facts. How should we live, move, and act in a world where people are operating from just completely different sets of perceived facts?
It's a good question, Matt. So I try to remember to say this every time I teach constitutional law. There's that old principle of English law that if two people without a vested interest in the matter affirm that a certain person committed a crime, right? Two people not connected to one another, not like brother and sister or husband and wife, just two separate people, no connection to the matter, no vested interest. If they say this person did that, this person broke the law, that presumptively is not the end of the story, right? Doesn't mean the person is guilty, but that presumptively has to be taken seriously. And I believe that that's the standard still for citizens' arrests in most states. If two people see a person committing a crime, if they're not connected, right? Two separate persons, two persons who have no family connection to one another. If they see a person committing a crime in most states, that gives them grounds to detain the offender until law enforcement shows up. So I am not radically skeptical about historical facts. I believe sometimes there's overwhelming evidence on the basis of testimony of people who have no vested interest in the matter that certain things happen. You know, Chris, you went to law school, you read legal history, you could read about a notorious crime committed in the 19th century, and maybe it's a notorious crime for all kinds of different reasons, but sometimes there's just no doubt about the fact that the person was guilty of the crime because so many witnesses came forward, right? So I encourage students when they begin the constitutional law course not to go in the direction of radical skepticism about historical facts. Sometimes we can have confidence. Admittedly, sometimes there are conflicting testimonies, but sometimes we have ample grounds to be confident of the truth of historical assertions, historical facts.
Mm, mm. Yeah, well, we've got a couple more questions here and about 5 or 6 more minutes, so we'll take as many of these as we can. Early Wright asks an interesting question. He says, if Christianity is the line that separates the old world from the modern world, do you view Christianity as a real progressive movement that, for example, liberates all people, especially Blacks and other minorities and women in our own modern world?
The short answer is yes. The emancipatory potential of Christianity, I think, is enormous. But we have to concede, and there are complexities here that just can't be treated glibly. If somebody said, "What's the difference between slavery in the ancient world in the West and slavery in the modern world?" It's reducible essentially to one idea. Slavery in the modern world is based on race. Slavery in the ancient world, there's really no evidence that it was based on race. It's very hard to understand fully the foundations of ancient slavery. I'm deeply curious about this question. I've read a lot on it. Those of you who recall your Aristotle, Politics, Book 1, Aristotle gives this suggestion that the slave is a person with diminished rationality. Diminished rationality means that the slave simply is incapable of conceiving plans and executing them without supervision, right? Like a slave is somebody who needs a kind of chaperone throughout life. Like, I will tell you what to do. I will direct you in all realms of life. And the position of the modern world is that the only people who might truly need that kind of chaperone are people of very limited mental or intellectual abilities. People who probably have to be institutionalized. But our view is even people who are well below average in intelligence, they can still kind of manage their own affairs. So you have this variable in modern slavery that just did not seem to exist in the ancient world. And many scholars, including Dr. Drew Johnson at King's, have elaborated on this part of it, which is much of the justification for modern slavery, race-based slavery, was premised on, not all of it, but much of it was premised on a distortion of scripture, essentially using the Christian faith to sinister ends. But at the same time, we must concede that many persons, abolitionists, we think of Wilberforce and so forth, they, thank God, read the Bible correctly. They read it in a very different way. They said you cannot cite the Bible as a justification for enslaving persons of African descent. If you understood scripture correctly, you would understand, as various passages in the New Testament indicate, that all of these divisions, which are so important in the modern world, in the world of slavery and the slave trade, all these divisions are insignificant from the standpoint of the faith. In Christ, there's neither male nor female, Greek nor Jew, master nor slave. So the emancipatory potential is there. It's recognized by many thinkers in the 19th century. Hegel, and then later a group of thinkers in Great Britain inspired by Hegel. They were called the British idealists. So many of them focused on the emancipatory elements of Christianity. So good question.
Yeah, thanks so much for that really, really thoughtful discussion of that. Turning back to a slightly more practical side of things, Andrea German asks, are there any constitutional precedents that are relevant to policing that may come up soon in the Supreme Court, if you're aware?
I don't teach the amendments that focus on criminal procedure in the con law course. Who knows, maybe we need to develop a course like that at King's. No, I'm unaware of any coming. What about you, Chris?
Oh, you're throwing it to me now.
No, I'm just unaware. You stay on top of the Supreme Court. Anybody in the audience? I mean, any of the lawyers in the audience? I'm unaware of any coming down the pike soon.
I think there's always an open question of the role of qualified immunity and some of the ways that police get immunity in certain instances where they might use excessive force or the role of cruel and unusual punishment in prisons. And so I think that's always ripe for the Supreme Court to review. Well, it looks like we're running out of time. I think there was one quick question that you should probably hear, and that's Katie Sangalis again. And she asks if you could please offer a master's in public policy. I think many of us would be very interested in learning again from you, and for some of us in the audience, learning from you for the first time. I hope everybody will join me and thank Professor Tubbs so much for joining us for the last 45 minutes. And for many of us, getting to hear from him again is always illuminating and always engaging. So thank you, Professor Tubbs.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks to all the alumni who came by. See you soon, I hope. Okay, cheers.
And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone back to Bridget Rogers, and she's going to talk to us a little bit more about alumni relations in King's.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Dr. Tubbs, so much for sharing not only your great intellect, but your heart for God's people, and for challenging us about the Christian tradition interacting with the liberal arts. We look forward to the Center for the Study of Christianity and the Black Experience as it launches and succeeds, and we look forward to participating and supporting you. And thank you too for reminding us how deeply invested you and all the faculty are in God's restoration of the world through the King's College. I see on the chat, everybody's like, oh, I miss King's, and I wish I went to King's. But I do have my coffee mug, Purple Nights, how about that, to encourage me, and so grateful to be on staff at the King's College. For those of you who weren't with us last night, my name is Bridget Rogers. I'm not only the Chief Development Officer, I'm also the liaison to your Alumni Association. So it's my responsibility and my joy to continue to build a mutually beneficial relationship between you, the alumni, and the college. You've helped refer students for admission, you've encouraged and connected and even hired alums. So thank you. And of course, we're so grateful that you financially supported the college. You know, as Diana reminds us, there are students at this college who have been at this college because of the support from alumni like you. And so thank you for whatever you can do. You might have been a part of Giving Tuesday last year. It was an enormous success. On the first Tuesday in December 2019, you and so many other alumni were encouraged on social media to give to the college. And oh my, did you give. We surpassed all our goals and raised over $173,000. And you've probably seen or heard now that we just rolled out this year's Giving Tuesday a few days ago. So we're already preparing for December 1st by inviting you this weekend to help lead the way. Our goal is to raise $200,000 by December 1st. It's a stretch goal, but one that we know we can meet together. So your donations could be directed as you like. You might remember, if you've given before, you can designate them. Know that all donations go to help the college and the students directly or indirectly. For instance, I think it would be good for you to know that there's a current student whose parents' livelihoods were profoundly disrupted during the coronavirus shutdown last spring. So this student is working a couple jobs, the parents are working a couple jobs, but not only can the student not afford to pay a balance this year, the student cannot afford to pay the outstanding balance from last year. But alumni from that student's home state, California, have worked to raise the support to pay off the student's balance and support the student. That is also the Kingsian way. So know that you are making a difference. So when you get a minute today, if you could please go to the King's donate page at tkc.edu. You can click on Give at the right side of the page. You can support the college monthly or with a one-time gift, or you can direct your giving to support student scholarships or the community fund, which directly helps students in need. Your choice, your heart. Thank you so much, deeply. What you are doing as alums in your lives, professionally and personally, is making a difference, not only out in the world, but also even back at the college. So thank you. I'll send it back to Holly now.
Thank you so much, Bridget. And I can just say personally, I'm so grateful for your personal investment. You guys, Bridget spends every Friday morning with me and Chris Ross and Chris Kendall talking about how we can facilitate alumni community. And so, Bridget, we are so grateful for your investment in Kings and alumni community. So thank you so much. Well, I wanted to give a quick recap. If those of you who are joining us for the first time today, we have some exciting things happening as we end this year and as we look ahead to 2021. We are going to be starting alumni chapters. And so we would love for you to be a part of that in any way that you would like. If you are interested in hosting a chapter or leading a chapter in your area, or just being a part of a chapter in your area, please email us at alumni@tkc.edu. We will be rolling that out in 2021, and we are so excited to facilitate community in our states and our cities and in our regions. The other thing I want to remind you about is what Chris Ross talked about, which was our alumni awards. As he said, our networks only extend so far, and so we would love to hear from you. There's several alumni awards. You can go to the website and you can read about each award and nominate your friends, your classmates, who you feel like live out the legacy that that award represents. The other thing we would love to invite you to participate in is being a part of our alumni executive committee. We have 3 open representative spots. I joined the committee for the first time a little over a year ago, right before last year's homecoming, and it has just been such an honor to be able to serve you guys and the school. And so we invite you to be a part of it. There are some incredible people on the committee. Steve French has served for almost 20 years on the committee. Lynn Mitchell, Rick Milham, Chris Ross are long-standing servants on the alumni committee. And we invite you to join us, and you can email alumni@tkc.edu as well if you would like to be a part of that. And then we also just wanted to remind you, last night we did a bit of a State of the Union for what we've accomplished in 2020. One of those is our Facebook guidelines. So if you're not a part of our TKC alumni Facebook group, we would love for you to be a part. You can just go to Facebook, type in the search bar TKC alumni, join us. That is the primary way that we communicate with you, as well as our email newsletters that the school sends out on a monthly basis to alumni. So we did update our Facebook guidelines to be able to create a community inside Facebook, which sometimes is a hard place to do, but we would love for you to review those guidelines and help us create as safe a place as possible to engage with each other on Facebook. We also had 2 subcommittees under the leadership of Sarah Keenan, who's watching today. Sarah, we're so thankful for your leadership as president of our committee previous to me. And we had 2 subcommittees that worked really hard to enhance communication with the school, which is part of what led to us meeting on a weekly basis with Bridget. And so we're so grateful for the time commitment that Bridget Rogers, President Tim Gibson, Tawny Chin, and the entire King staff is committed to supporting us as alum.